Wake up, we're here. So much was that we feared. There's nothing left here.
Well, it is mid-April. It's been about 11 weeks since the Donald took the Oval Office, so it seems like a good time to sort of check in and see what have we learned about Trump so far. Well, I think we learned a few things. I guess one is that he is who we thought he was, to borrow a famous sports line. And it looks like too that the gravity of the office, the sheer magnitude of the fact that he's president of the United States does not seem to have affected him at all in the least bit. And this was really clear on the very first day of his presidency when he went to the CIA and he stood in front of the memorial wall there, which Leon Panetta likened to Arlington Cemetery for the CIA, representing all the fallen agents that they've had over the last 50 plus years. And Trump took that opportunity to recount how unfairly the press treats him, how big his inauguration crowd sizes were, how smart he is, and how many times he's been on Time magazine covers, so forth. And that was ostensibly the purpose of that whole thing, was to smooth over his relationship with the intelligence community. That's his idea of doing that. So that was the first day. But then you flash forward, or just back up just very recently to the last few days, and he's still doing similar things. He just randomly the other day tweeted out, does anybody know if Hillary ever apologized for getting those debate answers? And which isn't even true. Like, she didn't get debate answers. She was leaked some debate questions by a CNN affiliate. But there are no debate answers. It's not like a spelling test where you can get the correct answers. And then in a few days after that, he's in an interview with the New York Times, and he's talking about Susan Rice and this whole sort of cooked up controversy over her unmasking names in intelligence reports. And he just casually says, yeah, I think she probably committed a crime. And they say, whoa, do you have anything to back that up? Or, what's your reason for saying that? No, I don't have any. I think it's going to come out later. So, using the weight of the presidency to just randomly accuse people of committing crimes. This is the kind of thing that he's doing as president, just tweeting. He's tweeting out little jabs at Arnold Schwarzenegger for his ratings on The Apprentice. Like, this is how spectacularly petty the guy is, but also just how unpresidential he is. And he's just going to do that kind of thing constantly. But it was maybe reasonable to think that once he became president, he would tone this down a little bit. And really, he hasn't much at all, if at all. What else do we know about him? We also know that he wasn't pretending to be ignorant and uninformed on government and policy and the law and foreign relations and international trade. He really is ignorant on all of those things. And that, of course, was clear before. But I remarked before the election, that one of two things must be true. Either Trump is stupid or he's pretending to be stupid. I can't say for sure which it is, but it seems like if he weren't pretending, he would occasionally say something interesting or intelligent, or that would indicate that he actually understands. There are certainly, maybe times in a campaign, especially for somebody like Trump, where being brash and making ridiculous statements maybe is going to help you with your base. But then there are other times, when you sit down with an interview with the New York Times or some serious news outlet, that you want to show that you do understand what you're talking about a little bit, that you have some grasp of policy and some grasp of national politics or international politics and geopolitics. And he was just never able to even come close to doing that. I mean, anytime he tried to talk about something beyond just rhetoric, it was completely obvious he had no idea what he was talking about. But recently he revealed that, nobody knew that healthcare was complicated. Except that literally everybody knew that healthcare was complicated. That he failed to repeal No Place Obamacare, which, by the way, he said just before the election that he would be able to do immediately. He would immediately repeal and replace Obamacare. Not only that, it would actually be quite easy. And I'm going to throw this in, it'll cost a fraction of what Obamacare did, and it would have better coverage. So that was all he was going to do, and it was going to be easy to do it. But he found out, actually, that healthcare is complicated. Who knew, right? Nobody knew that. Apparently, he also just found out that Lincoln, as in Abraham Lincoln, was a Republican. He was a few weeks ago. He was giving a little talk at a dinner, ironically in front of, or strangely in front of Republicans, Republican donors, and people who would be very familiar with the history of the Republican Party. And he says, "Did you know that Lincoln was a Republican? A lot of people don't know that. We should make a bigger deal out of that. Maybe we should take out an ad or something, one of those super PACs or something." I think he literally just found out that as president, as a member of the Republican Party who won the presidency, I think he actually just found out that Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. They call it the Party of Lincoln, but anyway. So these, he wasn't pretending on the campaign trail. We can say that for certain now, that this is what we got. We got a guy here who is just, not only is he ignorant about almost everything, but also just apparently not interested in learning about it. Doesn't think that he needs to learn the basics about about healthcare policy. He didn't really try to get into the policy at all. He didn't go out like Obama did in 2009 and 2010 and explain the healthcare policy in detail. He didn't do that at all. It was just going to be great. It's going to be amazing, right? This is what a salesman does. He doesn't, he doesn't know anything about what's in the car. He just wants you to buy it and get the hell off the lot as quickly as possible. What else do we know? We know that he makes decisions based on whim and gut instinct. And again, if you know anything about Trump's history, he actually admits this openly. He says, I don't pore over spreadsheets. I go on my instinct. I've always had great instincts. And people who study decision making and like prediction know that this is not a good way to make decisions. I mean, it's not debatable as to whether careful deliberation versus gut instinct decisions are better. Nobody's going to just be able to just make the right calls, especially with something as complicated as being president of the United States. The idea that he's just going to be able to make good decisions based on his gut instinct is quite ridiculous. But apparently he's just doing this, even with the decision to use military force, as we saw very recently in Syria, and then quickly after that in Afghanistan. He's also completely happy to attack anything that dares to question him, or in his mind, even something that treats him unfairly. And this, unfortunately, and this is a serious thing, is that this includes some of the institutions that are most critical to a free society. Recently, somebody, I can't remember exactly what outfit it was, but some polling group polled like 1,000 political scientists and asked them, what are the most important things to maintaining a democracy, to maintaining, a free governmental system? And the two things they said were most important is that you have free and fair elections and that you have a free press. And Trump has just overtly, explicitly, over and over attacked both of those institutions, and seemingly just kind of over his own ego, because he doesn't like the outcome, or he doesn't, in the case of the election, he didn't like the fact that Hillary won the popular vote. So he goes around saying that, the vote was rigged, or that, 3 to 5 million people voted illegally, and just casting serious doubt on the integrity of our electoral system, which is actually quite strong in reality. But now we have, the president of the United States using the bully pulpit to cast serious doubt on our whole electoral system. And in the case of the press, he just outright calls the press the enemy of the people. I mean, this is totally unprecedented in American politics, as far as I'm aware. Certainly in recent history. I mean, certainly all presidents have had sort of issues with how they've been covered, but no one has come out and said, "Oh, CNN is fake news, the New York Times is fake news, and actually the press is the enemy of the people." He would just repeat over and over the very dishonest media. So, these kind of things, attacking these institutions, I think it really has the potential to do long-term damage. So that's definitely a bad thing. But it's something that we've learned is that Trump is really not going to moderate his behavior very much just because he became president. We also know he's not a wizard deal maker. He's not this grand negotiator. And David Frum, who is now he's one of the top editors at The Atlantic and formerly was a speechwriter for George W. Bush, said during the whole health care debate, he said, this is just a friendly reminder that Trump's strength is not negotiating with able-minded and sophisticated people. It's with duping people who are unsuspecting and who are uninformed on a deal. And that totally seems to be true. I mean, I think Trump actually thought he could just sort of use Paul Ryan, get this healthcare thing done quickly, and he would sort of cast Paul Ryan aside, and then he would go on and do something else. And you just find out that it's much more complicated than that in D.C. I mean, and you only have a finite amount of people that you can work with. You can't just go find someone else who will fall for your scheme or who will give you what you want. You know, in D.C. politics, you got your Republican Congress that you have to work with, and you got to hammer out a deal with them. And Trump just showed absolutely no ability to navigate that landscape at all. So the whole idea that Trump was a little rough around the edges, but he's going to strike these great deals, and he knows how to talk to people, and he's going to, he's going to turn everything around. Everybody's going to bend to his will. He's learning that that's just not true. That like these other power forces in D.C. and internationally, they have their own interests, and they know what they're doing, and they haven't just started doing this yesterday. So you think you're going to come in and just sort of push everybody around? That's definitely not going to happen. And he's got this just total lack of awareness too, which just also makes him look more ignorant and more unprofessional and unpresidential. But it also just shows just a really severe lack of emotional intelligence, which is a little bit ironic because I think that is sort of Trump's strength, is being able to emotionally connect with people. So the fact that he's so tone deaf in other ways related to emotional intelligence is maybe a little surprising. But just a couple of examples of that. He's recounting his decision to make the military strike in Syria, to launch 59 missiles into Syria at an air base. I won't even go into the fact that Trump barked incessantly at Obama on Twitter and publicly that he should not do anything in Syria. Don't go into Syria. Waste of time. Waste of American treasure. Obama, do not attack Syria. There's nothing there for the United States. It'll be a mess. And this was after a much more severe chemical attack in 2013 than what Assad just did in Syria very recently. It was obviously it was still a heinous chemical attack on his own people, but it killed far fewer people than were killed back in 2013 when Trump was saying at Obama constantly, don't do anything in Syria. And he campaigned on this. He campaigned on staying out of Syria. Not our problem. Let Russia deal with it. If Russia wants to handle ISIS, blah, 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 blah. He was just clueless at the time. Anyway, so let's not even go into all that. But so he's explaining in a Fox News interview recently his decision to attack Syria. And in the middle of doing that, he starts, first of all, he just offers up that he was eating dinner at his luxury golf resort in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, with Chinese President Xi Jinping. But he starts recounting how beautiful the chocolate cake was that they were eating. It was the most beautiful piece of chocolate cake you've ever had. And I looked at President Xi, and he was enjoying he's literally stopping in the middle of the story about how he launched a deadly missile attack on another country to brag about how good the cake is at his hotel, and to brag about how awesome a time the Chinese president was having there. I mean, to talk about somebody who's tone deaf and just doesn't realize how that's going to look to other people. First of all, to admit that you were just like eating dessert as you decided to launch weapons at other people seems maybe just a tad cavalier. But then to top that off, he says, so then I looked over at President Xi and I said, we have just fired 59 missiles at Iraq. And the interviewer goes, at Iraq? Don't you mean Syria? And he takes a second. He looks genuinely confused even after she corrects him. And he's like, yeah, Syria. As if like, I think so. I mean, I really wish she had asked an open-ended question after that. Was it Iraq? And see what he would, if he could even recall the country that he actually bombed. But he did recall how awesome that chocolate cake was. It was really, really good. And everybody should go down to his resort too and check that out. Oh, by the way, and the price of becoming a member at his resort there, at his club in Mar-a-Lago, doubled recently after he became president. So that's nice for a president to literally be, charging people money to get access to him. And so that's another thing that we know is that Trump has not really made any serious attempt to cut himself off from his conflicts of interest, his financial conflicts of interest. I won't even go into them, but they are vast. And that's just one, tiny example. And then, of course, we have the Russia investigation. This is the investigation to determine whether Trump and any of his campaign affiliates had improper contact with Russians or in any way coordinated with Russia over things like, for example, the release of Hillary Clinton's hacked emails, whether they coordinated with WikiLeaks, whether they were, having improper contact with Russia and making any kind of plans to try to affect the election at all. all that would be very major revelation, and we do know for a fact that those investigations are ongoing, particularly the one at the FBI, which is a counterintelligence investigation. The head of the FBI, James Comey, testified about that. I guess it's been about a month ago. That was a really big deal. The confirmation that they are seriously investigating Trump-Russia ties, and that it's been going on since last July. And it seems like almost every day, certainly every week, new shoes drop on this investigation. And even John McCain, Republican John McCain, recently said that this investigation is a centipede, and there's going to be a lot more shoes to drop on this thing. So, pretty nifty little pun by Senator McCain. But just as one example, we found out that Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, who, by the way, around D.C. was known for one thing, and one thing only, which is having experience lobbying on behalf of pro-Russian interests in Russia and in former Soviet states, and making a lot of money off of it and playing dirty politics over there. I mean, that's he wasn't known for anything else. Well, it was recently found out that the day he left the Trump campaign, which he claims he worked for free for, he claims he wasn't paid at all by Trump, which should be fishy on its face. But we just found out that the day he left Trump's campaign, he set up this shell company, this sort of fake company, so that he could borrow $13 million from two Trump-affiliated companies on the very same day. So that looks really strange, and it's also really curious as to why Trump would not have just paid him directly. I mean, I don't, from his campaign. So all this was really bizarre and really fishy. We also know that Manafort made like $1.2 million from pro-Russian interests that he had not reported before. It looks like he did quite a bit of money laundering out of Ukraine on behalf, sort of in cahoots with the pro-Russian then president of Ukraine, which is all getting kind of complicated. But these are some really, really strange coincidences if there's nothing there. I mean, there's a lot of smoke coming out from behind the building for there to be nothing on fire within the building or behind the building. So that's going to be interesting to watch. And I think that, I was a little skeptical that was going to go anywhere, but sort of recent revelations have looked like this is, I think it's going to take a long time. Counterintelligence investigations can go on for years. It involves dozens of agents around the world. It could be a while before this is completed, but I do think that it is going to, there's a good chance that there's going to be some very serious findings. Whether or not they result in, something like impeachment, I don't know. I'm still a little bit skeptical about that, or a little reluctant to make any predictions like that. There maybe is a couple of silver linings, though. One thing is that Trump has sort of shown the ability, he calls it being flexible. I think his supporters would call it flip-flopping or breaking his promises. But, this week alone, he just reversed like 4 or 5 big policy positions. I mean, very significant policy positions that he campaigned on. One was that he was going to label China a currency manipulator. According to Trump, China has been killing us and they've been raping us. I mean, those are his words. China has been raping us on trade. They've been killing us. And then this week he says, no, China, we're not going to label them a currency manipulator. They actually haven't been manipulating their currency for a while. Like 10 days ago, literally, he was complaining about China manipulating their currency to give themselves trade advantages. And then a few days ago now he's saying, oh, no, it's actually been a long time since China's been manipulating. I mean, either he was just lying out of his ass or he was just totally clueless about what China has been doing recently. But that was a big policy shift. The willingness to get more involved in Syria was a big policy shift. I'm not exactly sure that's a good idea, but I guess you could maybe perceive this to be a positive, that he is a little bit flexible. And I think too, the thing that's so dangerous about Trump is his massive, fragile ego, which just comes with the territory when you're dealing with someone who is extremely narcissistic, which Trump obviously and 100% is a massive narcissist. So, for people who have that kind of mindset, everything in their universe is warped around their ego. Is my ego being stroked enough? Is anyone attacking it right now? And it's sort of everything else sort of just is on the periphery. And, Trump is really not even interested in like learning about policy or learning about anything other than, he's really most interested in talking and bragging about himself. But the potential silver lining there is that if his ratings get really bad, if his coverage is really bad, he may kind of start to learn the things he can do to get better coverage, and that would be to kind of moderate some of his positions, at least. I don't think he can really moderate his personality. I talked about earlier, he's going to continue to say absurd things. He's going to continue to attack people. But he may learn to, for example, to not rely on Steve Bannon so much. Bannon is Trump's current chief political strategist, and it was really kind of the brainchild behind a lot of Trump's rhetoric that he used and strategy that he used on the campaign trail. But there's already evidence that Bannon is sort of losing influence with Trump. And Trump basically threw him under the bus this week, actually. He was asked about Bannon and some of the infighting among Bannon and some of the other aides at the White House and other advisors. And Trump said, I like Steve. He's a good guy. But, Steve really didn't do much on the campaign. I mean, I had already beaten other senators, and I was already winning, when Steve came on. And just because I was facing crooked Hillary, I didn't really change anything because of Steve, and which, by the way, is a total lie. Okay, Bannon gave Trump, to the extent that Trump had any intellectual direction or drive at all, which is not much, but what he did get, he got from Bannon. And Bannon is a pretty clever strategist and sort of, I think, has a pretty good feel for undercurrents in public opinion in the United States and what kind of narratives will play well. But Bannon is also very, very extreme. I mean, he calls himself a Leninist. He says he wants to basically destroy the United States government. He wants to strip away the entire administrative state, as he calls it. If you've heard anything about the documentaries that he's produced in the past, they're very apocalyptical, I'm not sure which way, but that they're one of those two. He seems to think that the United States has to have this like cleansing experience by going through another major war, whether it be with China or with all of Islam, before we can kind of like reclaim our cultural heritage and purge ourselves of this whatever cultural malaise that we've been suffering from, according to Bannon's worldviews. This guy is really dark and has some really extreme views. So I think that's another positive, the fact that he seems to be pushed to the periphery, at least for now. And I think that's partly because the policies that Bannon pushed hard, like the immigration ban and the attempt to pass the health care law first, they were both big failures. Immigration ban was struck down. The second iteration is hung up in the courts. The attempt to repeal and replace Obamacare was a total failure. So I think Bannon for now has sort of been pushed to the outside to the advantage of Jared Kushner, who is Trump's son-in-law, and Trump's daughter Ivanka, who now has an official position at the White House. I mean, and we're obviously setting a very low bar that we are trading in someone who is dangerous and extreme and calls himself a nationalist and a Leninist in favor of people who are just merely incompetent and merely unqualified for the positions that they hold, which are key advisors to the president. I mean, Kushner, this guy, he's 36 years old. His first foray into real estate development was to vastly overpay for a building in New York, which is now bleeding money. It's not clear to me that he has any other relevant experience to even remotely be qualified to handle all the tasks that the president has given him, which is to broker a Middle Eastern peace, to revamp the entire government, to fix the VA. It's a comical list of things that Kushner is supposedly in charge of. Trump's son-in-law. It's a comedy show. But I guess it is an improvement over Steve Bannon, who was recently publishing articles at Breitbart that said things like birth control makes women fat and unattractive, and only white men can make decisions on matters of race because they're the only ones who can be unbiased, and just lots of things in that flavor at Breitbart. So, things are bad. There's plenty of reason to worry. Maybe the most significant reason right now is that Trump, recently was positively reinforced for launching military strikes, and given that he's sort of been frustrated in a lot of other endeavors, he's sort of been turned back on his immigration ban, on his attempt to pass the healthcare law. But one thing he did figure out is that, I can launch these missiles and nobody can stop me. I can do this unilaterally. And also, people seem to like it when I do it. So I don't think that's necessarily a good lesson for Trump to learn. And obviously is potentially disastrous. So that's certainly something to watch. But, maybe some silver lining in there too. He has shown some ability to be flexible. He's pushed Bannon out for now. So bottom line, he is who we thought he was. It's been pretty bad. It's likely to be bad, but Russia investigation looks fairly promising. The checks and balances of the United States government are working pretty well right now. We'll see if that continues. But yeah, hang in there, America. Looks like it's going to be a long ride.